What happens when a world-famous pianist tells a young black boy to show us what you've got, thinking it will be a funny moment to amuse a room of elites? But when 12-year-old Elijah Davis sits at the grand piano, what happens next leaves jaws on the floor. The arrogant musician who expected a joke finds himself stunned by raw genius he never imagined. What began as a moment of mockery turns into a life-changing performance that no one at that gala will ever forget. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The ballroom of the Langston Cultural Foundation Gala sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the low hum of elite conversation. The annual fundraiser attracted the city's wealthiest, CEOs, celebrities, politicians, all gathering beneath towering white columns and velvet drapes. At the center of the room stood a magnificent Steinway Model D concert grand piano, polished to a mirror finish. Tonight's star performer was none other than Julien Moreau, the celebrated French concert pianist, known as much for his technical brilliance as his icy arrogance. Julien had just dazzled the crowd with a breathtaking rendition of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Applause thundered through the ballroom as he rose from the bench, bowing with theatrical flair. In the back of the room, Elijah Davis, a quiet 12-year-old black boy in a too large borrowed suit, stood clutching a small plate of hors d'oeuvres. His mother, Danielle Davis, worked as a server for the catering company hired that night, and Elijah often accompanied her to events when childcare fell through. Elijah wasn't supposed to be in the main ballroom, but the lure of the grand piano had drawn him like a magnet. As the crowd mingled post-performance, Julien made his rounds, basking in praise. Near the refreshment table, he overheard a small group of elites discussing a charity program for underprivileged youth. Such programs are well-meaning, but honestly, Julien remarked with a smug smile, true musical talent cannot be taught. It is born, and it belongs to those with the right heritage, the right education. His comment drew knowing chuckles from the group, until one bold guest, Olivia Grant, chair of the Foundation's Youth Arts Committee, spoke up. "Well, Julien," Olivia said coolly, "talent often surprises us. You never know where genius may come from." Julien smirked. "Oh really? Shall we test this theory?" His eyes scanned the room until they landed on young Elijah, who stood gazing longingly at the Steinway. "You there!" Julien called loudly, drawing eyes toward Elijah. "You like the piano, no?" Elijah froze, shrinking under the sudden attention. "Why yes, sir," he stammered. "Well then," Julien said with mock cheer. "Come. Play for us. Let's see this hidden talent Miss Grant believes is everywhere." The crowd tittered. Danielle, returning from the kitchen, saw the scene unfolding and hurried forward. "Excuse me," she began. "Let him try," Julien interrupted smoothly. "Surely it will be entertaining." A murmur swept the crowd. Danielle touched Elijah's shoulder. "Baby, you don't have to," but Elijah, eyes wide but determined, whispered, "It's okay, Mama. I can." Heart pounding, Elijah approached the Steinway as the crowd formed a loose circle around him. Julien leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, smirking. The famous musician had intended to provoke a joke, but was about to witness something unforgettable. Elijah slid onto the piano bench, legs barely reaching the pedals. His hands hovered uncertainly over the gleaming keys. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then, with a deep inhale, Elijah placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu rang out, tentative at first, then building in confidence. The familiar, cascading arpeggios shimmered beneath his small fingers. The room fell utterly silent. Julien's smile faded, his brow furrowing. Elijah's hands moved with stunning agility, shaping each phrase with nuance beyond his years. He leaned into the melody, eyes half closed, lost in the music. The difficult crosshand passages flowed effortlessly. Danielle stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. Guests who moments before had stifled chuckles now stared in awe. Smartphones emerged, capturing the moment. Even Olivia Grant blinked in astonishment. Julian pushed off the pillar, stepping closer, eyes narrowing as the boy navigated the demanding coda with breathtaking precision. This was no parlor trick. This was artistry, ***. As Elijah struck the final resounding chord, the room erupted, gasps, thunderous applause, stunned murmurs. Elijah looked up, breathless, cheeks flushed. Julian stood rooted to the spot, the smug superiority gone from his face. For the first time in years, the maestro found himself, speechless. Olivia Grant approached the piano, voice trembling with excitement. "Young man, where on earth did you learn to play like that?" Elijah glanced shyly at his mother. "Mostly, from old YouTube videos. And sometimes at the church when they let me use the piano." The crowd buzzed with disbelief. Julian Moreau, the man who had summoned the boy as a joke, now faced the full weight of his own arrogance. And the night was far from over. As the last echoes of Elijah's performance faded, the ballroom was alive with hushed whispers and astonished glances. "Elijah Davis, is that his name? How is this possible? Did you see his technique? That wasn't beginner's luck." Danielle gripped her son's shoulder, both protective and proud. She had known her son's gift, heard it blossom in quiet moments after long work shifts, but never imagined it would be unveiled here, before the city's most powerful eyes. Julian Moreau remained standing by the Steinway, visibly rattled. His mind raced to process what he had just witnessed. A child, a black child from a working-class background, had performed one of the most challenging romantic pieces with a depth of interpretation many adult pianists struggled to master. Julian's ego burned. The performance, initially intended as a public joke at the expense of a child, had turned into a moment of humiliation, for him. "I must speak with the boy," he said briskly to no one in particular. As Julian stepped forward, Olivia Grant intercepted him, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Moreau, that child deserves more than your scrutiny. You owe him an apology." Julian's jaw tightened. He glanced at Elijah, whose gaze was still lowered in humility, unaware of the power shift in the room. "I was only encouraging youthful expression," Julian lied smoothly, voice regaining its polished tone. "Clearly, the boy has some natural ability." "Some," Olivia bristled but held her tongue. Meanwhile, several guests approached Danielle, pressing polite but curious questions. "Who is your son? Where does he study piano? Is he represented by anyone?" Danielle's voice shook slightly. "He's self-taught mostly. We don't have a piano at home. He practices where he can." The crowd murmured, stunned. The image of genius emerging from hardship carried an undeniable emotional weight. Nearby, Julian seethed internally. His carefully cultivated image of supreme expertise had been upstaged by a child, and his comment about heritage and education had been exposed for its narrow arrogance. The evening's tone had shifted. No longer was Julian Moreau the undisputed center of attention. All eyes were on Elijah Davis. Backstage in the staff hallway, Danielle pulled Elijah aside, voice trembling. "Baby, you didn't have to do that. They were trying to laugh at you." "I know, Mama," Elijah said softly. "But I wanted to show them." Tears welled in Danielle's eyes. She cupped her son's face. "You were brilliant. Just brilliant. I'm so proud of you." Suddenly, Olivia Grant appeared, accompanied by a sharply dressed woman with a silver streak through her hair, Marianne Lewis, artistic director of the Metro Youth Symphony. "Mrs. Davis," Olivia said warmly, "this is Marianne Lewis. We'd like to speak with you and Elijah, if that's all right." Danielle blinked, overwhelmed. "Of course." Meanwhile, word of the boys' performance had spread beyond the ballroom. Music critics present for the gala's coverage were already drafting online posts. A viral moment was brewing. Back in the main room, Julian Moreau faced the consequences of his arrogance. "You should make this right," Olivia had told him pointedly. Publicly. But Julian's pride warred with his public image. The idea of praising a boy who had embarrassed him so thoroughly felt unbearable. Instead, Julian approached the event's MC and whispered, "Perhaps best not to mention that child further tonight. Let's focus on the auction." But the MC hesitated. Too many guests had witnessed the moment. Social media notifications buzzed, snippets of Elijah's performance were already online. Across the room, Olivia and Marianne sat with Danielle and Elijah. "Elijah," Marianne said gently, "how long have you been playing?" "Since I was 6, Elijah answered. "Mama found an old keyboard once. After that, I learned by watching videos." Marianne exchanged a glance with Olivia. "You have extraordinary natural talent. The kind that can't be taught." Danielle's voice was wary. "But we don't have resources for lessons or a piano." "We can help with that," Olivia said firmly. "And with your permission, Mrs. Davis, I'd like to invite Elijah to audition for the Metro Youth Symphony. Full scholarship." Danielle's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my." Before more could be said, a sharp voice cut through. "Excuse me." Julian stood nearby, expression unreadable. "May I speak with the boy?" Danielle tensed. Olivia stood protectively. But Elijah looked up calmly. "It's okay." Julian knelt, voice cool. "Elijah, your playing was impressive. I underestimated you." There was no warmth in his tone, only a begrudging admission. Elijah met his gaze. "Thank you, sir." Julian rose abruptly. "I must prepare for my next engagement." And with that, he strode away, leaving behind a room that no longer viewed him the same. The storm had only just begun. A door opens. The battered keyboard in the Davis family's tiny living room crackled with tinny notes as Elijah practiced, his small fingers darting across worn keys that had lost their shine years ago. Light from the cracked blinds cast striped shadows on the floor. His mother, Danielle, returned from her morning shift at the diner, exhausted but smiling. She paused in the doorway, watching her son lean into the keys with closed eyes, as if the old plastic instrument were a concert grand. "Elijah, baby, you still playing?" she asked softly, setting down her bag. He looked up, eyes gleaming. "Mama, I can't stop thinking about the big piano at the gala." The keys felt like they could sing. Danielle smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "You made them sing, sweetheart. You turned that room upside down." Elijah's smile faded slightly. "Mama, do you think they were really impressed? Or just surprised?" Mr. Moreau didn't seem happy. Danielle's face darkened. "Mr. Moreau's feelings don't matter. What matters is what you can do." As if on cue, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Olivia Grant. Danielle answered quickly. "Yes. Good morning." Olivia's warm voice came through. "Good morning, Mrs. Davis. I wanted to let you know that I've spoken to Marianne Lewis, and she is very eager to audition Elijah for the Metro Youth Symphony. She was truly moved by his playing." Danielle's eyes widened. "Oh my, she really wants him." Absolutely. "And please don't worry about fees or uniforms. The foundation will cover everything. The audition is scheduled for Saturday at the Symphony Hall. I'll email you directions and bus vouchers." Danielle swallowed the lump in her throat. "Thank you, Ms. Grant. Thank you so much." After hanging up, she knelt beside Elijah. "Baby, you've got an audition. At the Symphony Hall. For a scholarship." Elijah's eyes widened. "Really? But Mama, we don't have nice clothes." And I've never auditioned before. Danielle smiled through tears. You don't need fancy clothes to show them who you are. You just need your gift. She looked around the tiny apartment, peeling paint, the humming refrigerator, their sagging couch, and whispered a silent prayer that her son's brilliance would carry him past the limits of their circumstances. That night, Elijah practiced long after dinner, the old keyboard ringing through the thin walls. In the apartment above, Mrs. Laverne, their elderly neighbor, smiled as she listened. That boy's got magic in his fingers, she told her daughter. Mark my words. The cold reception Saturday dawned clear and cold. Danielle and Elijah, bundled in their best, Elijah in a hand-me-down dress shirt a size too big, Danielle in her one good church dress, boarded the city bus before sunrise. Elijah clutched a folder of sheet music in his lap, worn edges taped and retaped. Mama, he whispered, I'm nervous. Danielle squeezed his hand. That just means you care. You've got this. The Metro Youth Symphony Hall loomed grand and gleaming downtown, marble pillars, gold leaf trim, and tall glass doors reflecting the city skyline. Inside, parents and students buzzed around the registration desk. Well-dressed children in tailored suits and designer dresses carried portfolios and iPads. Their parents hovered, chatting with familiarity. Danielle and Elijah entered quietly, drawing curious and, from some, patronizing glances. One mother whispered to another, do they even have an instructor? A boy Elijah's age, in a crisp blazer, eyed him with a smirk. Bet he can't read a single note. Danielle straightened her shoulders. They didn't come to impress with appearances. At the front, Marianne Lewis spotted them and hurried over, her warm smile cutting through the stares. Elijah. Mrs. Davis. I'm so glad you're here. Danielle exhaled in relief. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. We're honored. Elijah, you'll be using our Steinway Concert Grand today. Just take your time and play from the heart. Elijah nodded, clutching his sheet music. Across the room, a door opened, and in walked Julian Moreau, impeccably dressed, his sharp eyes scanning the hall. Elijah Davis is auditioning today, he asked Marianne, feigning casual curiosity. He is, Marianne replied coolly. I think I'll observe, Julian said, taking a seat by the judge's table. Word of Elijah's impending audition spread quickly. A group of parents gathered near the back, murmuring. Is that the boy from the gala? The one who embarrassed Moreau? Well, let's see if he can really deliver. Moments later, Elijah was called forward. Danielle hugged him tightly. I love you, baby. Go show them. Elijah approached the gleaming Steinway on the grand stage. The polished black surface reflected the bright stage lights. He glanced briefly at the crowd, at Julian's expectant, and condescending, gaze. Then he placed his fingers on the keys. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated through the hall, shimmering, delicate, full of aching beauty. Parents leaned forward. Children's chatter ceased. Elijah played not with mere technical skill, but with rare emotional depth, as if each note carried a story he needed the world to hear. The judges exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even Julian leaned in, arms no longer crossed. As the last notes faded, Elijah transitioned without pause into Liszt's La Campanella. Gasps rippled through the room. The piece was notoriously difficult, a bold choice. Elijah's fingers blurred across the keys with astonishing precision, light yet powerful. The passages rang out crystalline, effortless. By the time he struck the final chord, the room was silent, awestruck. Then applause erupted, from judges, from parents, even from some of the skeptical children. Julian Moreau sat stone-faced, his reputation dented further. Marianne rose. Elijah Davis, you have shown artistry beyond your years. We are honored to offer you a full scholarship and a place of leadership in our symphony. Tears streamed down Danielle's cheeks. Elijah looked at her with wide, grateful eyes. But as they embraced, a cold voice echoed. Technique is one thing, Julian spoke sharply. But the symphony demands discipline and proper mentorship. I question whether young Mr. Davis has had that. Gasps. Eyes turned to Marianne. She stood tall. Elijah Davis's playing speaks louder than any prejudice. He will have every opportunity here. Julian's jaw clenched. He gathered his coat and stormed out. Elijah and his mother watched, a mix of pride and sadness on their faces. But the door that had opened today would not be closed. And this was only the beginning. Notes of resistance. The days that followed Elijah's audition brought a flurry of activity that the Davis family had never experienced before. Phone calls. Emails. Letters of congratulations. Marianne Lewis arranged for a new upright piano to be delivered to their apartment, courtesy of an anonymous donor, though Danielle suspected Olivia Grant had a hand in it. When the movers arrived with the gleaming piano, Elijah stood frozen, eyes wide. "Mama, it's beautiful." Danielle wrapped him in her arms. "It's yours, baby. So you can keep making the music that's already in your heart." Across the city, word of Elijah's performance spread. The symphony's board members were abuzz. At a private board luncheon, Julian Moreau faced pointed questions. "Julian, I understand young Elijah's audition was remarkable. Are you certain your concerns are warranted? Talent like his could bring great attention to the symphony." Julian sipped his espresso with a tight smile. "Of course. I only caution that raw talent must be tempered with proper training." But his words lacked their usual weight. The board sensed it, and so did Julian. That evening, Marianne convened a special rehearsal for Elijah to meet some of the symphony's youth members. In the elegant rehearsal hall, Elijah arrived with Danielle, both nervous and excited. Marianne greeted them warmly. "Elijah, today you'll meet some of our most advanced students. You'll be joining their ensemble." Elijah nodded, clutching his music folder. As he approached the rehearsal space, a small group of well-dressed students eyed him. Among them stood Liam Carrington, son of a wealthy real estate mogul, and a gifted pianist himself. "So this is the famous Elijah Davis," Liam said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elijah extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." Liam ignored it, turning to the others. "You know, anyone can play flashy pieces. Real musicians understand the discipline it takes." A few students tittered nervously. Elijah's cheeks burned. He opened his music and sat at one of the practice pianos. Marianne clapped for attention. "We'll begin with the ensemble arrangement of Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 1. Elijah will take the first solo passage." Some parents, observing through the glass, exchanged glances. As the conductor raised his baton, the orchestra began, strings swelling, winds crisp. Then Elijah's cue arrived. He placed his fingers on the keys, heart pounding, and played with a precision and warmth that filled the room. By the second movement, even Liam's smug expression faltered. At the end of rehearsal, the conductor approached Elijah. "Outstanding. You're a natural." But as they packed up, Liam whispered, "Let's see if you can handle the full season. It's not just about talent." Elijah said nothing. He had heard worse, and he had already learned that the truest reply was always through the music. The gala looms. Weeks passed in a blur of rehearsals and practice. Elijah, now with a real piano, blossomed even further. Each night, after homework and chores, he would lose himself at the keys, the apartment alive with music late into the evening. Danielle watched proudly but worried about the looming Metro Youth Symphony Gala, an elite event where Elijah would make his official debut before the city's social elite and musical press. She confided in Olivia Grant over the phone. "I just want him to feel like he belongs there. All those fancy people." Olivia replied firmly, "Mrs. Davis, your son belongs anywhere his talent takes him. I'll make sure you both have everything you need." Meanwhile, in Julian Moreau's private studio, tension simmered. At a strategy meeting with symphony board members, Julian spoke coolly. "The gala is not the place for showcasing novelty. We must preserve its prestige. Marianne leaned forward. Mr. Moreau, Elijah Davis has earned his place through merit. His performance will be a highlight of the evening. Other board members murmured agreement. Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Privately, he seethed. The boy had not only embarrassed him, he was now becoming a symbol of a changing symphony culture that Julian did not welcome. Elsewhere, Liam Carrington practiced furiously, his pride wounded. His mother, watching, spoke sharply. You'll outperform that boy, do you hear me? You are a Carrington. At school, Elijah faced whispers. That's the piano boy from the gala. He's on YouTube now, millions of views. Doesn't even have a real teacher. Elijah kept his head down, but the pressure built. At night, he confided in his mother. Mama, what if I mess up at the gala? Danielle cupped his cheek. Baby, when you play, you make the music speak. That's all that matters. Let them listen. The night before the gala, Elijah sat alone at the piano, hands trembling. He thought of the crowd. The lights. The critics. Julian's gaze. Liam's smirk. And then, with a deep breath, he played, not for them, but for himself. For the joy, the love of music that no one could take from him. His mother listened quietly from the hallway, tears in her eyes. Tomorrow, the world would listen too. Curtain rises. The night of the Metro Youth Symphony Gala arrived with a crisp chill in the air and a buzz of anticipation that rippled through the city's elite circles. Limousines lined the circular drive outside the Symphony Hall. Photographers snapped as guests in glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos strode across the red carpet. Inside, the grand concert hall sparkled with crystal chandeliers and gold leaf. Velvet-draped balconies were packed with celebrities, CEOs, and dignitaries. In a side dressing room, Elijah Davis stood nervously before a mirror, straightening the new tuxedo that Olivia Grant had arranged. Danielle fussed over him, smoothing his lapels. You look so handsome, baby. Elijah swallowed hard. Mama, they're all out there. She cupped his face. And you're right here where you belong. Play for yourself. Play for the music. A knock sounded. Marianne Lewis entered with a warm smile. Elijah, you're on in 20 minutes. How do you feel? He took a deep breath. Ready. Downstairs in the VIP lounge, Julian Moreau sipped champagne with a tight smile as board members and patrons congratulated him on another successful gala. Yet the talk kept circling back to the boy pianist. Such a talent. Remarkable story. A true prodigy. Julian, you must be so proud to have mentored such promise. Mentored. The word stung. Across the hall, Liam Carrington tuned impatiently. His parents whispered to him. Remember, this is your stage. Don't let that boy steal your moment. In the main hall, Olivia and Danielle sat together, front row center. Danielle's hands shook with nerves. A hush fell as the MC took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Metro Youth Symphony Gala. Tonight, we celebrate the timeless power of music, and the promise of the next generation. Polite applause. We begin with a solo performance by one of our most exciting new talents, Mr. Elijah Davis. A ripple of surprise and curiosity moved through the hall. Backstage, Elijah's heart pounded. Marianne squeezed his shoulder. Play your truth, Elijah. As he walked onto the vast stage, the glare of lights and the sea of faces nearly stole his breath. He caught sight of Julian's unreadable gaze. Liam's smirk. The rows of glittering elites. Then, at the very front, his mother's tearful, proud smile. He sat at the concert grand, hands trembling slightly over the keys. A beat of silence. And then, Rachmaninoff's prelude in C-sharp minor erupted into the hall, thunderous and commanding. Gasps. Elijah's hands flew with precision and passion, every note resonant and alive. The difficult passages poured forth with maturity far beyond his years. As he reached the aching softer sections, the hall seemed to lean in, collectively holding its breath. Julian shifted in his seat, face tight. By the final resounding chords, the room burst into a standing ovation. Danielle wept openly. Olivia beamed. Backstage, even seasoned musicians watched in stunned admiration. Elijah stood, bowing humbly, eyes shining. The curtain had risen, and he had owned the stage. The breaking point after Elijah's performance, the intermission buzzed with chatter. Everywhere Julian turned, patrons praised the boy. Such command at his age. Remarkable sensitivity. Truly the highlight of the evening. Julian's grip tightened on his glass. This was not how the evening was supposed to unfold. In the green room, Marianne Lewis embraced Elijah. You were extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Danielle joined them, tear-streaked but glowing. I'm so proud of you, baby. But amid the celebration, a shadow loomed. Back in the hall, the second half of the program featured advanced soloists, including Liam Carrington. Liam stormed backstage, flushed. He stole the whole show. Everyone's talking about him. His mother hissed, then you must outplay him. Show them who belongs on that stage. When Liam performed, his technique was sharp, flawless, even. But the crowd's earlier energy had dimmed. The comparison was inevitable. Elijah had played with heart. Liam played with practiced perfection. Polite applause followed, but the magic was gone. Later, during the reception, Julian approached the board. This has gone too far, he said, voice cold. We cannot let a child with no formal training become the face of this symphony. Standards must be upheld. Marianne overheard and stepped in. Mr. Moreau, Elijah Davis has met, no, exceeded, every standard we have. Julian's gaze sharpened. I question the integrity of this process. A hush fell around them. From behind, Olivia Grant's voice rang clear. Do you question the integrity of the audience's standing ovation? Of the board's unanimous praise? Of the music itself? Julian's jaw tightened. He turned on his heel and strode out, pride in tatters. Backstage, Elijah sat quietly, the weight of the night settling in. Danielle knelt beside him. You changed hearts tonight, baby. Don't you ever forget that. Marianne entered, eyes bright. Elijah, there are many who will try to diminish what you've done. But your music speaks for itself. Across town, Julian paced alone in his studio. He had built a career on the illusion of control, and tonight, a 12-year-old had shattered that illusion. The breaking point had come. The question was what would rise in its place. The reckoning the morning after the gala, headlines blazed across social media. Prodigy pianist Elijah Davis wows symphony audience, 12-year-old self-taught musician steals the show, symphony's future shaped by a new star. Clips of Elijah's performance racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Journalists flooded Marianne Lewis's inbox with interview requests. The symphony's board chair called an emergency meeting. Across the city, in a sleek penthouse, Julian Moreau scrolled through the coverage with cold fury. The narrative had slipped beyond his grasp. Reduced to a sideshow, he muttered. Our gala transformed into a feel-good viral clip. He paced, pride smoldering. He had built his career on excellence, rigor, and now this boy, this outsider, was being hailed as the future of the symphony. At the Symphony Hall, the board meeting convened in the grand conference room. Marianne arrived, accompanied by Olivia Grant and two sympathetic board members. Julian entered late, face drawn but chin high. Let's address the obvious, the board chair began. Elijah Davis's performance last night was unprecedented. The public response has been extraordinary. I question whether such response is indicative of genuine artistry, Julian interjected sharply. Public sentiment is fickle. Viral trends fade. Marianne leaned forward. What does not fade is talent, which Elijah possesses in abundance. We would be fools not to support and cultivate it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Julian's gaze flickered. Are we to abandon standards for sentiment? Olivia's voice rang clear. Supporting Elijah is not about sentiment. It is about recognizing brilliance, wherever it arises. Our mission is to nurture young musicians, not gatekeep based on pedigree. Several board members nodded. The chair addressed Julian directly. Mr. Moreau, it is the board's consensus that Elijah Davis will continue as a principal performer. Furthermore, the symphony will offer him a full mentorship program, including access to master classes and international opportunities. Julian's hands clenched under the table. This is highly irregular, he said, voice taut. And yet, I see that I am outvoted. With a stiff nod, he rose. Very well. I trust you will manage the consequences. As he exited, the room exhaled. The old guard had been challenged, and for once, the future had won. Meanwhile, across town, Danielle and Elijah sat in their kitchen, reading the glowing articles on Olivia's donated laptop. Elijah looked up, wide-eyed. Mama, is this real? She smiled through tears. It's real, baby. And it's just the beginning. The phone rang. Marianne's voice came through, warm and excited. Elijah, I have news. You've been invited to perform at the International Young Pianists Festival in Vienna. Silence. Danielle covered her mouth. Elijah blinked. Vienna? The place with the castles and music halls? Yes, Marianne laughed. We'll take care of the arrangements. You've earned this. As the call ended, Elijah turned to his mother, heart racing. Mama. Vienna. Danielle pulled him close. You're going to show the whole world what you can do. A new movement 3 months later, a crisp spring breeze carried the sounds of street musicians through the historic streets of Vienna. Inside the Grand Musikverein, the International Young Pianists Festival was in full swing. Talented children from across the globe had gathered to perform before critics, patrons, and some of the world's finest instructors. Backstage, Elijah sat quietly, fingers tracing patterns on his lap. Danielle squeezed his shoulders. No matter how fancy this place is, she whispered, you've got the music in you. That's what matters. He nodded, breathing deep. In the audience, Olivia Grant and Marianne Lewis sat beside esteemed international judges. The buzz of expectation filled the air. Even in Vienna, word of Elijah's journey had preceded him. Several journalists awaited his performance. Backstage, Julian Moreau observed from a shadowed corner. After the gala, public pressure, and board insistence, had forced him to accept Elijah's continued rise. Yet part of him still believed the boy's success would falter under true scrutiny. The MC took the stage. From the United States, please welcome Elijah Davis. Applause swelled. Elijah walked onto the legendary stage, heart-thudding. He sat before a gleaming Bosendorfer Grand, the same model once played by the masters he admired. He closed his eyes. This was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about honoring the music that had saved him, sustained him. He began with Beethoven's Sonata No. 14, the Moonlight Sonata. The opening notes floated into the hall, gentle, mournful, timeless. The audience stilled. Elijah played not as a child copying greatness, but as an artist interpreting it, infusing each note with soul and depth. By the second movement, whispers spread among the judges. When he launched into the final Chopin ballade, his fingers danced with both fire and grace. Even Julian, seated stiffly, could not deny the mastery before him. When the final chord faded, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. Elijah stood, face flushed, and bowed deeply. Backstage, Danielle embraced him, weeping. You did it, baby. Marianne approached, eyes shining. Elijah, you have a standing invitation to study here. And more than that, you have made history tonight. Later, at the reception, a quiet voice addressed him. Elijah. He turned. Julian Moreau stood there, hands folded. For what it is worth, Julian said stiffly, your playing was extraordinary. Elijah nodded. Thank you, sir. Julian hesitated. Anne. I was wrong. Danielle watched as her son met the maestro's gaze without fear or bitterness. Thank you, Elijah said simply, then turned back to his friends. The world had changed. As the stars glittered over Vienna, Elijah Davis, once a boy mocked on a ballroom floor, had risen to stand among the world's finest. And his music had only just begun. Dear friend, how many young talents like Elijah are dismissed because of how they look, where they come from, or what people expect of them? His story reminds us that true brilliance knows no boundaries of race or class, it simply asks for a chance to be heard. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Together, let's celebrate stories that challenge prejudice and uplift potential. Thank you for watching, and keep listening for the music that changes hearts.